Hello and welcome to another episode of Anomalies. I'm one of your hosts, Dan Hall. I'm coming to you from beautiful, rainy downtown Olympia, Washington. And with me is my friend and co host, Gwen Farrell. That's not raining in Arizona, is it?
Actually, it is. Talk about crazy
Oh, it
weather.
is. Okay. Anyway, what I wanted to do, and I really appreciate our guest tonight. I've been interested in the phenomena of Sasquatch for quite some time. And so I thought it would be interesting to have some other people who are also interested in the phenomena just kind of give us their experience. We've got one more person going to join us here. And just kind of see if we can brainstorm some ideas about the nature of Sasquatch. So I'm just going to briefly introduce uh, some of our guests, and then we're going to get into this subject. Um, so yeah, let's let Geoff join here. So Mike Paterson from Sasquatch, Ontario, he's been on Anomalies before. We'll hear his just incredible experiences with Sasquatch. Jason Valenti, who I know from the Bellingham area, who had some interesting Sasquatch experiences. And just joining us is Geoff Pratt, who Geoff and I teach a cryptozoology class. I think we're doing that this spring, right, Geoff?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay. Okay. So let's just start with why are we interested in Sasquatch? And I'm not going to say whoever wants to start. I'm not going to say you go first. Who wants to start?
I'll jump in there, I guess. For me, it was an epiphany, basically. I wasn't even looking for them when it first happened. I was in the forest with a camera, chasing wildlife, looking for wildlife photos, and I believe I was being watched, and I was given an epiphany. And I always had an interest in the subject, but I didn't believe that, or didn't even think of them being in Ontario here in Ontario, Ontario, Canada, because I know there's a Ontario and Oregon.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I always thought one had to go to the West Coast, for any chance encounter, something like that, and had no idea what they were. I believe they existed from the Paterson Gimlin film. That's always a piece of film that everybody resorts to. But other than that, I just had an epiphany one day that I think was them watching me, and put it in my psyche to start searching for them. At this point, considering what I've experienced, that's my thought on that.
Anything else you want to share, or just make some introductory comments and then we'll get a little deeper into the weeds here if you want?
Well, I've been doing this for 15 years now. 2008, October 25th was my life-changing moment. And that's when I heard one vocalize very close. And it happened in a place I'd never suspect in a million years. It was the top end of Toronto. GTA, Greater Toronto Area, city of millions of people. The area is bordered by homes. There's people walk their dogs through there, horseback. There's, I think, about 5,000 protected acres up there. And it was like, who would ever think of that? It was way far south. You would think you'd have to go north in the middle of nowhere, but I never used to really speak about that because I didn't want to give that information out. At this point, though, it's pretty well known they're practically anywhere. So, and they can show up practically anywhere. So yeah, my first close vocal encounter, basically city of Toronto. It's crazy.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like the typical place you'd have a Sasquatch encounter at, but nevertheless. Jason, what about your first encounter with Sasquatch or your interest in this subject?
Well, it's kind of funny. My first encounter happened in 1990, but I didn't know that's what was happening because my brain at that time wouldn't allow myself to accept what I was seeing. So I was actually seeing a different common animal in the forest. And it wasn't until 2004 when I was on an expedition and I was sick. And sometimes when I get really sick, my mind just does this kind of like a sweep inventory of its memories, and then I relive the whole thing in a flash and realized that what I was looking at was a Sasquatch in the swamp at around midnight. But that was the first time it happened to me. But the time that I always talked about the most until 2004, where my first sighting was in 1996. That was the thing that really woke me up because it was a full frontal sighting as we were driving down the road in Apalachicola National Forest. It was a spring of '96, and we knew that what we saw had to be the real thing because of just the nature of what had happened. We were so close to her that if the window would have been rolled down, the guy sitting next to me, Dennis, who was wide awake as I was, could have grabbed her right arm, and then he saw her jump from a standing position. Once we passed her and she was about 20 feet off the back bumper, he saw her jump from a standing position, do the standing broad jump, twist 90 degrees at the same time, all in one movement, and land about 30 feet away after that squat thrust, real powerful movement. And when she hit the ground, she was running. So, there was no way that could have been anybody in a suit. So that's how we knew that we saw something, something biologically very different than anything that we were familiar with. And so that was the thing that changed my life. So that was my second experience, but I didn't know that I had had the previous one until years later.
And I've heard you tell the story before. It seemed like one of the things that you said when you told the story is you had an emotional reaction to this, and your friend did too. Do I remember that correctly?
Oh yeah, I was screwed up for about 2 weeks. I was just barely holding it together. I would be at work, working on equipment. I was doing biomedical equipment repair, but we had a family business, and I just would break out crying. I would be just overcome because I couldn't stop that sequence of what I saw. It just kept playing over and over and over. It was like on repeat, morning, noon, and night for weeks. And of course, there was nobody. And my sighting was in Florida. That's the funny part. It was in the Panhandle of Florida. And so when I was telling people about it, everybody thought I was doing drugs. I went to church, told everybody, and the church answer was, "Well, you saw the devil, and we just need to plead the blood of Jesus over you and exorcise the demon."
Mhm.
I said, "No, I saw a flesh and blood something. Thank you. I'm glad that you think you're trying to help me, but no, these things are existing, and why are they existing?" And so I knew I needed to take a deep dive into the subject, and but that's what made it really hard for me, because if I would have grew up here, up in Bellingham, I probably would have had a way, way more supportive
Yeah.
support system. But it was zero in the part of the country that I grew up in. So, yeah, it was, yeah, I hadn't talked to Dennis since this had all happened. And I think I may have shared in the last episode that some of the reasons to that was the case. But yeah, we were both deeply impacted by that experience. Yeah.
I can relate to when you mentioned morning from the moment you wake up till you go to bed, that it just plays over and over. It happened with me with the vocal,
Mhm.
and that went on for months. I couldn't get it out of my head, over and over, and that wasn't even a visual. So I can imagine, what you went through.
Yeah.
Interesting stuff. Well, Geoff, now you and I teach a class in the spring here in Olympia, and I'll bet you money that part of that class is devoted to Bigfoot. And I know that's a passion of yours. Tell us about that.
Oh, it's a 50-year passion now. When I was a kid, two things happened sometime in the year of 1973 that certainly influenced my viewpoint, much to my parents' chagrin and any friends I had at the time. But I was a Boy Scout at the time and got Boy's Life magazine, and in the August 1973 edition of that, there was an article on the history of the Bigfoot sightings from Ape Canyon and Albert Osman's kidnapping, about the creature. That certainly piqued my interest. But earlier that year, I was a young, 9 or 10 at the time, I guess. Sitting in the back seat of my parents' car. I think I was picked up after from school. My sister may have been there. I don't recall, but there was something came on the radio about a couple of boys in the woods in where I lived at the time in Missouri. Couple of kids describing some big hairy bipedal something or another. And my parents were laughing at the story, and obviously the newscasters were not taking it very seriously either. I mean, this was 1973, and but I remember thinking distinctly, well, maybe they did see something. Maybe there is something to this. A name was given to the creature, Momo, or Missouri Monster. Except for Hawaii, every state in the Union has these stories. Every province in Canada probably has these stories. Even south of the border has these stories. So there's nothing really new about that. I think my interest is in more of a folklore perspective, but you have 400 plus years of sightings. And unless there's a vast conspiracy going on here, which I don't think that's the case, people are seeing things out in our woods. I have not been blessed or cursed. I mean, it depends on how you look at it, I suppose, with it. I had times when I've been out in the woods, south of here, heading toward a place called Shelton, near the Squaxin Island reservation, for the native people that live there. They have stories. I talked to someone in their gift shop a few years ago, and the gal that ran it was telling that they're on their reservation. They're there. And one time when my daughter and my wife and I were hiking with our dog, not far from there, it felt like something's kind of watching me in the woods. So some cases, I don't think they have to make their physical presence felt. You can, in some cases, I think you can almost sense it.
Sounds kind of
Definitely.
familiar. Gwen, why don't you jump in here? I don't want me to
Oh, okay.
monopolize.
I've been making a few notes here. So if it's okay, I've got one or two little questions for each of you. And so I'll let you know where I'm going with this. So, okay, Mike, we had a little chat while we were waiting before the other guys joined us. And I had some questions I want to ask about a couple things that we talked about. I see a lot of similarities between what I do as a therapist with experiencers of UFO, UAP, contact events, things like that, and what you guys are talking about now, which absolutely makes perfect sense when you think about the psychology of human beings. So I'm really thrilled about and interested in what you've been saying here. So you were talking about your Sasquatch family. And one of my questions to you is, do they live here in this reality, in this dimension, or do they come and go?
They interact in this dimension. They hide in another one, or hide outside of our visual. They physically interact where I've learned there's no walls with them. Like I'm getting my foot grabbed underneath the table sitting in the kitchen when we're on location, or physical contact, pats in the head, pokes in the shoulder,
Mm-hmm.
vocals indoors. There's no walls with them, so they interact in this dimension with this dimension. Where they reside, I don't know. I believe it may be inside the earth. I have asked them if non-humans live inside the earth. That was actually a question I put to them last visit, and they affirmed that. Um, where they live and reside, I don't know. If I did know, if I did know positively, I wouldn't give that information out though, because
Sure.
just to protect them, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I believe they're quite protected with their abilities that they have, and some people might have a difficult time accepting that they have abilities, right? When you only get a visual, or
Mm-hmm.
but in a situation like my own, I've barely had a visual, but I've had over 1,000 encounters, barely a glimpse so far.
Okay.
Why that is, I don't know.
Okay, yeah, very interesting. Right. Thank you. You also were talking about apports, which we know are fairly common paranormal things that people report. And you said you've had like over 1,000 of these. Why? Why do they send apports to you, do you think?
Oh, I think we're up in the number of thousands at this point with the marbles. It's been mainly marbles, but all kinds of other items too, even sticks and rocks and other trinkets, but mostly marbles. We never get tired of them, right? I'm building up a big collection here.
Mm-hmm.
I think they like to see a couple things. I think it's to show their presence, and they like to see the reaction. It's always it's fun, right? When we get a marble, it's always a fun reaction. I think they enjoy that. The pleasure it gives us, getting this gift of a marble. This one, I showed you this earlier. Like I got that one last visit, really cool one. And we were talking about I was talking about as I mentioned earlier, about the red orb incident that happened on location one night. And as I was mentioning that to the property owner last visit, that's when this marble came out of thin air, basically bounced off me. I've captured one on video as well, so that was cool. But like I said, I think it's to show their presence, and I think they like to see the reaction.
The reaction. Good. Yeah, I can understand that. Can I ask Jason and Geoff, would you like to respond to either of those questions from your own experience?
Sorry,
Yeah.
What was the question again?
Well, I was asking him specifically about where are they always here? So do you think Sasquatch are always here and they're hiding somewhere, or do you think they go back and forth between this reality or dimension to others? Do you think they live somewhere else and they come here for a while to do something, or what do you think?
Well, here's my opinion. Both of my sightings were very, very physical. When I go back into my memory of them and try to pick up any detail that would qualify as outside of physical, I can't get anything. And so when I first started researching this in 1996 and was introduced to different books on the topic of Sasquatch, and the one I mainly fell really just dove deep into, that one was Sitchin's work on the 12th planet, and because it had a chapter that talked about the existence of hominoids hundreds of thousands of years ago, and that an advanced race that came here to hybridize us out of them. And for some reason, that made a lot of sense to me. So I was doing my research a lot between 96 and I would say probably the late 2000s in the domain of it being very physical, thinking that they were Australopithecines, the different offshoots of the homos, and that made a lot of sense to me. And I think that the answer to the question is probably all the above, because what's not to say that there are advanced races, interdimensional races of higher intelligence using the blueprint, because I kind of refer to them as a blueprint for biological entities. Because if you look at the way, at least in anatomical terms and their morphology, they are suited to live in extreme environments, with all the hair, adipose tissue, their metabolism they probably have much more control of their metabolism. They may hibernate, we don't know. They have some pretty awesome physical characteristics that makes them pretty elusive. But it wasn't really probably until the mid 2000s when I was running SasquatchResearch.com for several years, and I had a couple of different wildlife biologists contact me and meet me for lunch, and they were like, "I need somebody to talk to," I was like, "Okay." And both of them, they didn't know each other, and they said, "This thing was talking to me in my mind. I shit you not." And I was like, "That's cool. We keep getting these reports, so you're not alone." So they obviously had some kind of extrasensory, transceiver built into their brain or mind or whatever. And I started to have to accept the fact that, okay, so there is a component to this equation that is outside of the realm of physical. There has to be. Too many things are happening. And then the more and more I went to conferences and met more and more people and interviewed them, I was picking up on all kinds of paranormal stuff. And so it's made sense that, maybe we're dealing with, some of them can be interdimensional. I've seen a lot of different information in the last 25, 29 years since I've been researching this. So I'm going to have to say all the above.
Great. Oh, thank you very much. Geoff, would you care to comment on that?
Yes, I certainly do. I've never seen one. All right, I certainly believe they're out there. I think there's enough unexplored territory where if something wants to stay hidden from human eyesight, it will stay hidden. As far as that goes, I think basically they're physical. But this is my opinion, and not everybody's going to agree on it. I think why they're able to stay hidden is one explanation I've heard is because a lot of these sightings are kind of close to water, that they have underground caves that they go and hide in. And that's certainly a possibility. Do I think there's a supernatural aspect to their behavior? Why not?
Why not?
But yeah, I like I said, I haven't seen one. I mean, I have not been blessed or cursed, depending on how you look at it. I mean, I've had some other weird experiences in other parts of the paranormal realm, but not a Sasquatch.
Neither do I. I keep my fingers crossed. I'm not likely to see them in my neighborhood in the middle of metropolitan Phoenix. So
You might.
who knows?
You might.
So we'll see. I might. Okay, Dan, you want to take it for a while?
Well, one of the things I am wondering about as I'm listening to these guys talk. So Jason knows Sherry Mulholland, who was on our program last time but couldn't be here tonight. Sherry has had 3 sightings of Sasquatch on the Lummi Reservation. I have been out on the Lummi Reservation looking for Sasquatch till hell freezes over, and I've never seen anything. So the question becomes, does Sasquatch let us see them? Does he, she, it reveal themselves to certain persons? What do you think about that? Any of you?
Well, I'll take
Why
it because, I was out. I spent a lot of time on the Lummi Reservation, and
I bet you did.
and I did. Yeah, when your call dropped last time, Sherry and I were reminiscing, and I didn't know that she was doing research out there at the same time I was. My research window is that I lived on Lummi Island, and I would just take the ferry over on foot because I had a car on the island and car on land on the mainland, and I would just stay out all night driving around. And it finally happened. I did get it on film. I was holding this high-8 camcorder as I was driving down Chief Martin Road. And Sherry and I were laughing about that because Any Lummi will tell you if you want to see Sasquatch, drive down Chief Martin Road in the middle of the night. And sure enough, one day it finally happened. But I was out there like almost every night for a whole month, the month of August of 2004. And so finally this thing's walking down the road, and then it starts to cross over, and I'm like, the camera started, because I'm like looking down the road like, oh my God, is that what I'm looking at? And the camcorder's like kind of like relaxing in my hand. But I caught the whole thing. I sent it to Autumn Williams at Oregon Bigfoot, and she backlit it. I sent the original to Doug Hychek from White Wolf Entertainment, the guy that
Right.
produced Sasquatch Legend Meets Science. And so, yeah, it was kind of funny because I had a couple of experiences on Lummi. I mean, I saw the red eyes, right there in the forest, and they were glowing. They told me that that was something that they could do, and I didn't believe them until I saw it. I said, "You mean like when you shine a light in their eyes?" And they said, "No, their eyes grow red. They glow red on their own. No reflectivity, no flashlights. You just see them in the forest." And when I saw that, that was pretty unnerving. And I, I was looking for it, and I got to see it again. The first time I wasn't looking for it, and I don't know why. I've had a lot of people tell me that, well, maybe because you were with Dennis, because paranormal things did happen to this guy, which I didn't know that at the time. We talked about it later, like a year later, and that's when he told me that he had a lot of, crazy stuff happen to him. But I don't know. I really don't know. Some people go out there looking for Sasquatch. I got a couple of other colleagues that have had some more experiences. They got to see him again. So, and that was, that's on their own effort. As far as them allowing it, I don't know. Like the one that we saw, it seemed like she was completely taken by surprise. Absolutely 100%. And I think the one that was tracking next to me in the swamp when I was running through it, I think it was probably a young one that was just curious. Like, oh, what's this guy doing up in the middle of the night here? So I don't know. And then I think, maybe when it comes to the interdimensional thing, it just makes sense that maybe they're searching for certain energy signatures, then they'll materialize, for some reason, beyond our understanding. But that's kind of the way I'm looking at it.
We just did a show on Mothman, and when you talked about the red glowing eyes, that kind of triggered some thoughts about Mothman. Geoff, do you comment? Not about Mothman, but about what Mike and
Glowing
Cece
red
talked.
eyes. Uh, well, I was thinking of um, thinking of a demon, But again,
Demons.
that's my, yeah, yeah. I'm a I'm a recovering Catholic. We'll put it that way. So yeah, you get the
Congratulations.
yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you,
congratulations.
yeah. Yeah. I still have my hangovers from it though. Um, well, yeah. I mean, yeah, that's the first thought I had. Yeah, well, yeah, like a demon, that's like from Ghostbusters. Yeah, it's um, yeah, this supernatural aspect um um to him or her or it is keeps coming up again and again. Part of me, the anthropologist side of me, still wants to kind of believe there's a flesh and blood possibility here only, and then the other part of me, the other part of me thinks there may be more than maybe something else going on here too. So I'm kind of torn than anything. I mean, this isn't quite like like some of the other cryptids. I mean, the Loch Ness monster. I mean, I think there is a scientific explanation for what's going on there, but um, with Bigfoot, Sasquatch,
Can I share with you what I found out about the red eyes?
Sure.
Scientifically speaking? Okay.
definitely, as I was saying, I find the whole thing puzzling.
Yeah.
Not just red either.
Well, this is
Numerous colors.
what's that?
Go
I'm
ahead, G.
just saying other colors too. It's not just red.
Yeah, well, I definitely saw green the first time I saw it. And the guy sitting next to me said he saw orange, which was really, but there's like this parallax thing that happens in their eyes.
I've seen
Yeah,
orange
you see
too.
that in almost all game do that. But what was really
Colors
interesting
of the rainbow.
when I did call Doug Hychek and I got him on the phone, I explained to him that I had just had a series of things happen on the reservation. And, I was getting his address and telling him I want him to look at this footage and tell me what he thinks. And during that conversation, when I brought up the red eyes, he said to me that him and his family for years, and I don't know if Doug is in Manitoba or in Ontario. I know that or no, he's in Michigan or Minnesota, but he used to travel up north, I think close to where you are, Mike. And they would be like halfway up one of those provinces, very remote, land of 1,000 lakes. And he said one of the things that they would do in the middle of the summer is that they would go for these night hikes in the middle of the night and just walk for hours. And in this area he was describing to me, there was like the trees were in hammocks, like just clusters of trees. And then it would be just like this grass, like grass flats and kind of swampy. And so they would just walk on the gravel road that came to their cabin. And there was, nobody around. I mean, it had a pretty remote place where they would vacation. And he said one night that they were walking, that they have one of the kids looked over into the trees and said, "Holy shit, there's glowing red eyes." And they stopped and they looked over and they were all at different heights. They counted 6 sets of eyes and they were anywhere from like dark red to almost an orange color, but glowing and it was just starlight. The moon wasn't even out. It was very, very dark. And so he's watching this, and of course it's unnerving. And he's like, "Oh, kids, let's just head back for right now. Let's go back to the cabin." But he told me that he did some research on this, and the interesting thing that he found out is that none of the primates alive today do this. But he did find out in the scientific literature that human eyeballs average 5 to 7 bioluminescent cells per eyeball, which at the time when I was talking to him about this confirmed what Sitchin was saying in the 12th Planet about the Anunnaki hybridizing humans with existing hominoids. Because if you're going to do a fusion of DNA, that could mean that the byproduct would have a being, us, that would have that vestigial. So from an anthropological point of view, mixed with some sci-fi, that made a lot of sense to me at the time that Doug had found that out.
Take it as you want, but like I have ongoing communication, been documenting this family for a decade now. It's every visit for 10 years. So I asked them the question about who created humans, and they didn't respond to that. I changed my questioning to did the Anunnaki create humans, and they affirmed that. I just figured, and I want to give a red eye story as well. There was like I saw orange the first night, but the property owner and his girlfriend were on a snowmobile one night, and they were flying. And this is one of the stories they told me before I showed up. A pair of disembodied red eyes were following them and keeping up with them. So those eyes were moving.
Yeah, it's kind of weird when you see when people see the red eyes on the reservation, it does look disembodied. Like the first time I saw it was 10 feet off the ground, but I couldn't make out a body. I could see that there was a black, like shadowy thing, but I couldn't make out a physical form, and my headlights were right on the thing. And it just did like 2 steps across 2 lanes and it was off the road. And people everybody reports that seeing the same thing. It's like these disembodied eyes that it's almost like, I mean, for years I would say, well, it's like their hair was like a black hole for light. It just absorbed it. And then you just would see these eyes, and which borders paranormal. It's like, well, what the hell? How is it doing that? And Autumn Williams said when she backlit the video that I shot, she goes, it's so weird because it looks like a brontosaurus moving across the road. Like this real long neck, and then you can see the eye shine, and then everything trailing behind it. Just none of it fits the description of like what we see in daylight sightings. At nighttime, it's an absolute mystery.
From what I've heard, with stories and that they are fallible. They do make mistakes. That's why they're caught with that surprised look on their face.
Right.
often enough. In a situation that I'm involved in like that, where it's, it's an ongoing thing, it's very methodical. You don't catch them off guard. It's so extremely rare. I can think of one incident where Dwayne, we were up on the property, and he said he saw a young one duck behind a tree stump really, really fast. As soon as he saw it, boom, it was gone. I think that's about the only time that he caught one, maybe by mistake. Maybe that wasn't by mistake. I don't know. And then there was nothing, right? As far as like, I know them to be physical, flesh and blood. I'm documenting this stuff all the time, right? This is why I love the winter as well. This is two different individuals in the family, and I've learned they choose to leave their footprints. I showed up last visit, sorry, 2 visits ago. There was some snow on the ground. There's a single 16-inch footprint waiting for me. 2 footprints from a younger one. Both the big one and the young print both had black hair in them. The 2 footprints from the younger one, I was preparing casting material, and I turned my back for a minute, stirring this stuff up. I go to pour it. 2 more prints have just shown up, so they're right there. I've learned they choose to leave their prints. We had an incident years back where it was, I can't remember if it was left or right foot. It was, I'll say the left foot, then about 5 feet left foot, 5 feet left foot. There was no impact on the snow. I scratched my head wondering, how the hell are they doing that? And after time, I realized, he was just walking normal and not allowing that other foot to be seen, just choosing to show that print. Last winter, I had prints appearing in real time right beside me while I was documenting. I didn't catch it on camera, but we were scanning the snow. We'd come outside, we took a look. There's no prints, so we're about to go in. And I turn around just to give one last scan, and boom, right there's a single print that wasn't there just seconds earlier. So I'm documenting that, and then suddenly there's, I think it's 4 or 5 more prints from 3 different, I think it was 3 different individuals showing up, while I'm documenting doing that, right? So they do have these abilities. They have an understanding of energy and consciousness that is just incomprehensible to us as humans, right? We're not there yet.
Yeah, thank you. Really interesting. Dan, did you want to go ahead, or can I jump in here?
No, keep going, Gwen.
Okay. Wow. So again, I've been making a few notes here. Jason, can I ask you if you don't mind sharing this information? You said the first time that you had a contact being, you didn't use it as what it was. You said you realized it as an animal. Do you recall what that animal was?
Well, it was definitely a Sasquatch, or people call it the Florida skunk ape. Whatever people want to call it. But what was funny, that what my mind did to me, and I think it's because I grew up very religious. I went to Bible college. I studied to be a minister. I thought there was a calling on my life to be a pastor and all that stuff. So I think that because I was trained to only see the world through that lens, when I had the experience in the swamp, when I turned my head and I looked after I heard a footfall, I saw the face. But I think what my mind did, it completely just disfigured it. Like, you're looking at a deer. You're not looking at anything else but a deer. It's what my brain told me to survive. It's just because I just took off in a run, because the moonbeams coming through the cypress canopy came right across its face, and I could see it just staring right at me. And I was just like, oh shit. And then I just took off running. And but I didn't get clarity on any of that sequence of events until 15 years later, like when I was on this expedition up in outside of Gold Bar, Washington. And I was hiking through the mountain. I was sick. I was really sick. And I had this really high fever, and I'm just wearing a sweatshirt and sweatpants. It's like 20 degrees out. And I'm just like walking up and down these logging roads all night. And then for some reason, I just had total recall because I was walking with my eyes closed, leaning putting my head on Paul's shoulder because he was as tall as me. We're both like 6'4", 6'5", and I just had total recall that night of that. I relived that whole sequence of events, and I pulled my head off his shoulder. I said, "Holy, that was the Sasquatch. That wasn't a deer." But it took all that time for me to process that because I had to let go of a lot of my conditioning from being religious about it because I was told that the earth was 6,000 years old and that there's no such thing as ape man. They didn't exist, that the devil put them there in the fossil record. I was told all kinds of stuff growing up about that kind of stuff. And so when I had my experience in 1990, I think that's just how my brain just almost just like put it into a closet, for safekeeping for a later date.
Yeah.
So that's what happened to me. That's the best I can describe it.
I would agree with that. I think what we know is that, first of all, the human brain protects itself.
Absolutely.
If it's something that it doesn't recognize and it thinks might be dangerous, it has, its own way of just changing it into something else or blocking it in some way. And we see that with experiencers of ET contact so much. We even have a phrase called screen images that people talk about that are animals. You guys may have heard of those. I'm sure you have. And so that's the reason I was interested in what animal did you perceive that way, because deer are particularly common ones that people report. Of course, you were in the forest too, so there are deer there. But I was interested in what kind of an experience you had the first time. That stuff. And frequently we hear that this stuff doesn't come clear to somebody for the rest of their life or much later in life. And it's just kind of like, who knows what causes it? It's almost like your brain is ready to look at it because of other experiences or because it got tired of holding it in on itself. Who knows? But it will definitely come like that. So yeah, we do understand that. Let's see if there was going to be, this may be, I'm not a Sasquatch expert, so this may be a really simple, stupid question. But the question is, Jason, how did you know that the Sasquatch was a she?
Oh, the anatomy made it pretty obvious. I can't say.
So they have a physical anatomy like a human woman with breasts?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
Hourglass figure. Her hips were extraordinarily wide.
Okay.
I have a picture of it. I can probably drop it in the chat. I'll try to find it. Well, not right now, this second, but I'll drop it in the chat here in a second if I find it. But yeah, she had really wide hips, narrow waist, and like her torso didn't it wasn't like a classic V like a lot of the male Sasquatches have this like almost bodybuilder type build. Hers was more like an NBA basketball player, just very svelte. I remember her arms, they were while they were probably pretty big in diameter relative to her body proportions, they were just slender. And I remember like her forearm right here, it was so wide, like it built like a gorilla. I mean, it kind of reminded me of a gorilla arm, but just not as thick, but just longer and more sinewy. And but she did have, what I saw on her front was, I just saw hair swinging back and forth like a pendulum when she was walking backwards with her hands in front of her face. And I remember looking at her chest for a second going, that's weird. I just remember thinking, because I couldn't see any nipples. I couldn't see the outline of breasts. I just remember all the hair on her chest was going like, just going back and forth when she was walking backwards. But it definitely looked like a girl. It looked like female anatomy, just like
Female anatomy.
looked like a human woman mixed with an ape or a bonobo. She didn't look like a gorilla. She looked more like a chimpanzee, like just a really tall, 7-foot tall chimpanzee with human characteristics. Like definitely the hands look like ours. She didn't have a lot of facial hair. It was like Fu Manchu kind of beard, real sparse, and her head was just really little. For the width of her shoulders, it looked like her head was just sitting right on top of her shoulders and like kind of protruding out a little bit. But she definitely had an hourglass figure.
Thank you, Mike. You have seen these beings. Would you agree? Have you seen physical female anatomy in them? Have you seen differences that way?
I've barely been given a visual, and I don't know why. Although we were given photos. There was an incident that happened back in 2019. with the property owner, and he'd stepped outside. He heard this childlike giggle, so he knew something was up because we'd been doing this for a while. And he pointed his phone. He didn't see what he was photographing, and he took 2 photographs seconds apart. And this was Neff, basically leaning on the fence, so his body isn't showing. You know, he's got a forearm on the fence, which is very silky black looking, and he's balding, very oily skin. He has almost somebody had mentioned once, I thought, yeah, it's a good description. He has almost a bat-like nose, you know, and they are people, right? They have names, they have individual names. So I would assume they all differ in their appearance as well. Is there different kinds of them? Considering, you know, what Neff looks like compared to others, yeah, I would assume so. But there's clear face photos on my channel, the Sasquatch Ontario channel. So I sat in those for 3.5 years, and I was told by them, you know, to put those out. Came a time, it was very interesting stuff how it happened, but like I said, not everybody's on board with. It's very evolved, advanced situation that I'm involved in, so it's you know, when someone like Jason talks about all these physical sightings and that, it's difficult to accept, I would assume, some of the stuff that I'm talking about, right? You know, I kind of envy a little bit how many sightings and visuals you've had, but you know, other people might be a little envious of you know, the contact that I'm given, because it's very extreme, right? But it's all over the place, this stuff. And
Sure is.
so yeah, as far as their appearance goes, I think it varies greatly individually.
Good. One more thing I want to ask about a physical characteristic. One thing that many people talk about is an odor. That this is one thing that people say they were sitting on a rock having lunch in the middle of a hike, and all of a sudden they smelt this really strong odor. And that's the thing that supposedly keyed them to that. I know you guys have heard that before. What about your experience, Jason? And have you noticed an odor?
The first 2 experiences, like when I saw it in the swamp, I didn't smell anything. And then when I saw it, the full visual that was in the car, the windows were rolled up, it was cold outside, so we didn't smell anything, didn't hear anything. It's completely visual. Now, when I was on the reservation, I did have the experience, like when I first saw the eyes in the mist, there was like this fog, and I looked to my right, and I was like, it was like right in the blackberry bushes, and I saw these, like, it looked like 2 red reflectors just side by side. And then when my headlights hit the fog, I saw the outline of the head, and then it just kind of rotated and turned around like this. And then right as I was passing it, the smell hit me. It came right through the vents, and it was like this. It was like rotten eggs and garbage. Just it, and I was so blown away. I kind of just, you know, and this is funny to me because here I've already had a complete visual of this thing, and I was so excited to smell it because I heard so many people talk about it. You know, the lummies were always saying, "Have you smelled it yet?" And I was like, "No, I can't wait." Finally had that experience, and I kept on doing a U-turn in the middle of the road in the middle of the night, and I just kept on driving back and forth, and it took like about, I think it was like 5 or 6 times before the smell dissipated, but it was intense. Yeah.
Cool.
I've been basically given the answer to the smells, and they create them. They create different smells. They can recreate smells, and they turn them off and on like a light switch, and they can individualize. You can have somebody stand right beside you and not smell what you're smelling, because this happens indoors. So we've been given putrid, horrible, you know, dog crap, farm manure, some really nice, beautiful wood burning stuff. He even recreated the smell of black hash, and also a vape pen that the property owner has. It was last visit. I was all of a sudden I was surrounded by this. Happened a few times throughout the night, and he wasn't smoking this vape pen at all. But he was the previous visit. There's been sulfur, very strong sulfur smell. And it's like I said, it's turned off and on like a light switch. I've had it put right up my nostril, sitting at the table like a little whirlwind tornado. I felt it go right up my nostril. Property owner sitting right there, almost arm's length away. He can't smell anything. And then they switched it, gave it to him, and and then I can't smell it, right? So they've shown me they create these and recreate smells.
Interesting. Dan?
One of the things I want to ask Mike about, I'm getting conscientious about our time here, is in a previous show that we did with you, and you were talking about Neff. And how did you know Neff's name? Did Neff tell you his name?
Yeah, it was after, we knew they're watching us. We knew they were around us at the time. This is back in 2013. At first, we used to call him Mr. Funny, because of their prankster antics. There's a lot of humor involved in contact with their presence. And I knew they were there. So I kept, patting my chest and saying my name. I kept doing that and asking for his. And finally, I think it was months later, he spoke close to the audio recorder. He said, Mike Dwayne Nefatia. So he said, my name, the property owner's name. And another time he said Anastasia, sister. We've gotten, I think it's 10 names out of them so far.
One of the things I remember you telling me, at least I think, unless I'm hallucinating, is that you actually put out some kind of drawing board on the property, and Neff or one of the creatures drew some figures. Am I remembering that correctly?
This is when right at the beginning of starting with the written, the written stuff. Yeah, I bought a whiteboard and I put it up in the woods. I draw crappy drawings, a human and one of them. When I retrieved it, they had taken the marker and did this squiggly line connecting the two. So that was like basically the first thing.
That's pretty interesting.
Now it's a chalkboard and a sketch pad, and it's mainly the chalkboard at this point. I'm just writing down questions, and it's always behind our backs. They don't like to be seen. I don't think they're visual when this happens, but we step outside, and I've gone, a lot of people think, oh yeah, it's probably the property owner. He's doing it when your back's turned. Or it's like there's been so many times that I'm the last one out, and I check everything, and I'm the first one in. I check everything. I'm right on it. I don't have to, and I don't have to anymore. It's so extreme with the activity, but the questions, like I'll tell you this is ridiculously funny and kind of rude, but I'll tell you anyways. I don't have the picture here right now, but they've told me some stuff about my own self, right? So I had written the question last visit, where do I come from? We come back inside, they'd drawn a penis.
Like, you mean you don't know?
I was crying and we were laughing so hard.
Yeah, I could see that.
Just their understanding of, basically that. And that's not what I was asking, obviously, but for them to respond like that, showing their humor like that, it's just hilarious. So yeah, they're very, very smart.
So I have one last question. Gwen, do you have anything else?
I
No.
do.
Okay,
I'll
go
just
ahead.
make a quickie here. I'd like to talk to Geoff, and I understand that what you've done is you look at this anthropologically as an anthropologist, as someone who looks at culture, traditions, perhaps history, mythologies, things like that. Am I on the right track kind of here with you?
Yeah, a lot into the mythology.
Mm-hmm.
This creature's been around for thousands of years. We'll put it that way. It's actually in some of the major myths in Western civilization. It's there. Going back to the Epic of Gilgamesh, Beowulf. Grendel is basically a wild man. So yeah, it's eternal. The green Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. The Green Man himself, a vegetation deity, kind of a force of nature, a harbinger, if you will. Is whenever these sightings occur, some type of major trauma occurs not long after. And that's kind of what fascinates me about this in part. Besides the fact that we may have a anthropoid, large being out in our nation's forests, under our noses, basically, in some cases, literally.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I'm kind of coming at it from that direction too, because I know so little about this. It's a new field for me to get into. But I live in Arizona, so we have the Navajo Reservation, part of the Navajo Reservation here, the largest reservation in the country. And of course, there are some Sasquatch or Bigfoot sightings reported on it. We did an interview just a few months ago with the Navajo Rangers on Anomalies, who are really interesting guys. We hope to have them come back again soon and talk more about this. But it seems that there aren't as many reports in that area of the country as there are where there are forests or where things are green. The reservation is stark. It's beautiful, but it's stark, and they don't seem to have as places to hide, maybe, as they do in areas where there are forests and lots of green places where they can be. But they are seen. And something I discovered is, okay, I don't speak Navajo, so anybody out there who speaks Navajo, please excuse me, my butchering the language. But the name for the Sasquatch in Navajo is Yeti, Yeti Dikui. And I'm like, Yeti? I thought the Yeti were all in the Himalayas somewhere.
Right.
Yeti. So I'm definitely going to be talking to the rangers about that and finding out more information about that. But so I see this culturally as well. And I find it interesting from kind of that viewpoint too. It's fascinating. It's just like you said, are they really, really here? Obviously something is. And how are they getting into our heads and getting into our minds? So great, good information, guys. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah. One final thing, Jason, do you still live in Bellingham?
Yeah, I actually just moved back here from Anacortes in November.
Or what's going on Sasquatch research wise in Bellingham? Anything?
Oh, I haven't really checked into that at all. I know Brian Smith was way more active in that than I was. I've kind of taken some time off. Yeah. I
Okay,
did go
just
out this
wondering.
past summer. I did go out this past summer to Gold Bar, to this research area with my buddy John Andrews and a couple of other guys. But yeah, I haven't really heard of any like major activity recently. And by the way, I did drop the image of Paul Smith's rendition of my sighting in the chat.
Oh,
Guys,
thank you.
feel free to download it, and keep it for your records.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, I took a look at that.
Yeah,
Yeah, the only thing off about that is that, like I said, I didn't see nipples, but Paul just, after interviewing me for like 7 years, he goes, "Okay, I'm going to take a shot at this," and that was his rendition. I wish he was still alive because he probably would do another one. But
well, I want to thank each of you, Geoff and Jason and Mike. I really appreciate the fact that you would come on our show and share your knowledge. I think it's going to help me figure out where the hell I'm at when it comes to Sasquatch. So thank you very much for spending your time with us. Gwen, do you want to tell our listeners who we got coming up next?
Sure. Let me take a look at my calendar here. As always, we have some really interesting guests who are going to be joining us. Tomorrow, we're going to have Madeline Tobias, who is a retired psychotherapist who has worked and specialized with cults. So she'll be talking to us about cults that she's learned about, a few she's had a little personal experience with, and about how people get caught up in cults. So that should be fascinating. She's a great speaker, so it should be a lot of fun. Then the next thing we have is on the 12th of this month, we have Howard Beatty, and I think he's going to talk to us about near-death experiences. Is that right, Dan?
Yes, think so.
Yeah, so that should be a really good one also. The following Friday, we're having Rhonda Hall, who's another Arizona person. She lives in Southern Arizona, and she is going to talk to us about her work as a medium and a psychic, and some really unique and interesting genealogical studies that she's done, which are going to be very interesting to hear about. So that's what we have so far. I think actually we have a little bit more going on to February. We have on February 19th, Robert Farrell, who's going to talk to us about the Peruvian mummies that he has seen and has done some work with. He's very knowledgeable in that area, and Dr. Robert Farrell. And I think that's all. Anything else, Dan?
I can't remember anything else, but then I have
I
a
think that's-
short-term memory problem anyway. So once
I think
again,
that's-
Mike, Jason, Geoff, thank you very much. We'll get this probably edited minimally, and Dave Jinks does all that for us. And then we'll send you a link once we get up on the webpage. Thank you guys very much.
Right, guys,
Appreciate
lots
it.
of fun. I enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Happy New Year.
Happy.
Happy,
Happy New
oh
Year.
yeah, Happy New Year.
Yes.